What's up, guys? I hope you all are well and staying safe during this crazy time. I have been getting a ton of questions about the Hafthor and Eddie Hall situation and everything surrounding the record attempt that Hafthor is going to make at 501 kilos. I've also got questions on some of the other records that are going to be streamed after that. Luke Stoltman going after the log record, Tom Stoltman going after a stone record, and now just announced today Alexei Novikov going after a dumbbell record. All of these records, as far as I know, are planned to be live streamed from these athletes' home gym or training facility and then broadcast to be world records. Now, I'm going to try to break this down being a neutral party in all of this. So I'm not going to get into any of the stuff that Eddie and Hafthor have been saying back and forth because they're two men and that's between them and they can say what they want to say. I'm strictly going to talk about my thoughts on all of these records. So starting out with the big one that everybody has been talking about basically since 2016, leading up to 2016 when Eddie Hall put out publicly that he was going to lift 500 kilos, and it was such a big news story back then, and everybody was talking about it, of course, leading up to the World Deadlift Championship in 2016. I want to talk about the deadlift record in strongman in general, because a lot of people following this may not realize kind of some of the history. But the deadlift record in strongman before about that time, maybe 2015, 2016, was always done on whatever bar or implement was in the competition. So, going back to even the 90s, some of those guys set records with like the Flintstone deadlift where the rocks were loaded onto the bar and the weights weren't exactly correct. And moving forward, Zydrunas Savickas broke the world record in 2011 with an Ironmind SQ bar, which is a thicker bar, much stiffer with big globe ends on it. Very tough setup for deadlift. I broke the world record in 2013 with that same setup. So after that, when I held that world record, Benny Magnuson actually came after me and broke my record at the time with a deadlift bar, so a flexible bar and calibrated plates, which, my thoughts at the time was, well, that's an easier pull than what I did, but that's what happened. And in between all of that, there were deadlift records that were done on deadlift bars with calibrated plates and then other strongman setups. And the point of what I'm saying here is that things have moved forward, and so now it's recognized that the strongman deadlift world record is done on a deadlift bar with calibrated plates, and that's just the setup that you have to use now, just as a standard. So it's great that it's moved forward to that point. I think that's a good thing. I think that it should move forward, although in the sport of strongman there is some allure to all the different deadlift setup. So, we've got car deadlifts and elevated deadlifts and axle deadlifts and, this type of thing. So, this 500 kilos on a standard bar that Eddie was able to do in 2016, that competition, there was a lot of factors with that competition, and that contest was definitely set up for Eddie to pull that 500 kilos. I put out a video back in 2016 talking about whether or not I would compete at that competition, and I was wanting the weight jumps to be different, but the weight jumps were already predetermined, and so I decided to back out. I didn't compete at that competition strictly for that reason, because they were going to do a jump from 465 kilos all the way to 500 kilos, and I wanted something in the range in between there, so that I could try to set a new personal best, and I thought that was what I was capable of, but they told me no. So everything around the World Deadlift Championship in 2016 was set for Eddie to break the 500 kilos, and rightfully so. I know that his sponsor was, at the time, was taking care of a lot of the prize money and that type of thing. So I backed out. he set the stage. He said he was going to do it. He did it. Okay, he pulled the 500 kilos, and since then there's been a lot of talk back and forth about if somebody would break it, this 501 kilos, and this is, I feel like, been kind of a never-ending story. In 2016, the Arnold came out with the elephant deadlift bar, and then that created a whole nother ball of wax when it came to strongman deadlifts, whether that should be counted as a official, record, and I don't want to necessarily go into all of that, but the bottom line is, Eddie Hall lifted the 500 kilos in 2016 on a standard bar with calibrated plates. Moving forward, there's been a lot of talk rising up about Hafthor being potentially able to pull 501 kilos to break that record. Now, in Hafthor's defense, he planned and said that he was going to go after this 501 kilo attempt in Bahrain at a World's Ultimate Strongman sanctioned event, and unfortunately, due to the worldwide circumstances right now, that contest had to be canceled. Now, he basically has said, and World's Ultimate Strongman has said, that what they're going to do is they're going to live stream an attempt from Hafthor's gym, and they're going to call that now the world record. So he's going to go 501 kilos, and that will be the new world record. So this is where things now have got interesting, and where I think that a few things need to be put on record as far as this record and all of these records. Obviously, I'm talking now about the deadlift record. We'll go into the other ones after this, but this is a touchy subject because we're in uncharted territory as far as this worldwide, whatever you want to call it, that's going on, that's shutting everything down. So what I will say is that there is no governing body in strongman. There's no federation. There's no kind of group of people or person that overlooks the sport and says, okay, this is a world record, we're going to count this as a world record. None of that exists. It's something where these individual contests have kind of stepped up to the plate, and World's Ultimate Strongman is one of them now that has come into the sport and tried to do some really good things, and should be recognized in an official contest that they can certify a world record. Giants Live have done it, obviously the Arnold, some of these bigger contests, this is where the records go. But as a whole, strongman world records have always been kind of controversial at points, because in the sport of strongman we use all kinds of different implements. There's different contests that happen, and it really turns into a debate about what should be considered a world record, what should not be considered a world record, and it gets a little bit tough at times, and it's been that way. But what I will say is, when it comes to, let's talk about the deadlift record specifically first. When it comes to this record, in my opinion, it needs to be done in a competition. I will say that. And it's not because of anything with the bar not being what the bar is supposed to be, or the weights not weighing what they're supposed to weigh. I think that on video, absolutely, you could capture all of that. Whether the plates were brand new, you took them out of the box and put them on the scale, or you had plates that you weighed and certified every single one of them, and everybody was able to see that. It's not about the bar weighing what it's supposed to weigh, or Hafthor in this instance deadlifting what he says he's going to deadlift. Not about that. It's about the competition factor when you're setting a record. So follow me on this. When you are in a competition and there is, however many other men competing alongside you, you do not get to determine exactly when you go to lift. So, for example, in a deadlift competition where there's a rising bar, even if the weight jumps are set, you don't know how many guys are going to make it to the next round. You don't know how long they're going to take. For example, if somebody gets a bloody nose and bleeds all over the platform, they've got to take time to clean that up. So you don't get to time any of this out. And in a training setting, you absolutely get to time it out. So, I mean, for me, I know in my training, especially when I'm building up to a big max, I can take as long as I want to be ready for that lift. Mentally prepare for it, get ready for it. In a contest, sometimes all of that goes out the window, and when they call your name and the bar's loaded, you've got to go whether you're ready or not. Now, when you're getting to these bigger lifts, a lot of times the contests will slow down, but that still doesn't mean that you're in control of all of these other factors when it comes to the other athletes. And that's a major, major thing to setting world records. I'll give one example. Way back in 2009, I was doing an axle deadlift with no straps. And we were getting up to where it would be a new world record. Kevin Nee, if any of you guys remember him, went out before me, stepped up to the axle, tried to lift it, detached his bicep. Bicep came off. Everybody came in and was like, oh man, what's going on? And I was next to lift. So as soon as they were able to get Kevin out of the way, they said, all right, Brian, the bar's loaded, you have to go. How was I supposed to prepare for that? I was able to step up to that axle, and it was 848 pounds with no straps, and I was able to lift that for a new world record, but it was not as easy as what I was doing in training. That is certainly a fact. And so that's just one example that I will give you when it comes to that. So all of the controversy aside about what the bar will weigh, in my opinion, a strongman world record needs to be set in a competition. We've come a long way with moving this sport forward, and we're no longer competing as when I started. A lot of contests happened in parking lots and that type of thing, and the weights weren't maybe weighed out perfectly, and everything has evolved so much in the sport moving forward. It's such a tough situation right now because I genuinely feel bad for Hafthor. I know this is something that he's set his sights on doing, and he's put a lot of training and a lot of time into getting ready for this. But if we start to allow strongman records to be set in gyms with that person's equipment, we're opening Pandora's box even more when it comes to all of these strongman world records, and it's only going to create more controversy whether the weights were correct or the judging was correct, or what the circumstances were around that record. And myself included, there's a lot of other men that have worked very, very hard to bring this sport forward and to get it out of parking lots, and to get it where, the world is paying much more attention, and you have more fans that are paying attention to this. So, if, the circumstances are very, very hard, but that doesn't mean that because everything had to be canceled, that all of a sudden now we just get to set world records in our own gyms and put it on camera. I mean, I've done a lot of world record lists, or what would have been world record lists at the time, in my gym that I got on camera. And I've always kind of made the joke in seminars and things that I've done that, you can't show up to a competition with a video and show it to the judge and say, hey, this is what I lifted in training. This is a good lift. I should get credit for that in a competition. And, obviously that's a little bit of an extreme example, but we need to be very careful with where we move forward with the sport. World's Ultimate Strongman is saying that they're going to certify this, but what I would say is, as far as I know, the directors of World Ultimate Strongman are not going to be flying to Iceland, and none of the other athletes are going to be allowed to make an attempt on this deadlift bar, which again takes away the competition standard that has been set over all of these years. And so, it's, again, I feel horrible for Hafthor because this is terrible, and I understand he's ready to do it, he wants to do it, and if you want to put on a good show and you want to have people tune in and do the live stream, and I'm sure there's some money involved from different people. I have no idea how much, but I'm guaranteeing that Hofstra is not doing this for free, for nothing. So it's something where if you want to put on a good show and you want to do that big lift, then that is perfectly fine and it can be certified. But in my opinion, it would have to be an unofficial world record at that point. And it's a tough thing to say, but where do we go if we start allowing these world records to be set in people's gyms? How do we close that? In all seriousness, how do we get it back? You can't. Next year, if I want to set a world in my gym, can I stream it and say, okay, I'm gonna get a credible judge and I'm gonna lift now? Like, when do you get to close that box back up? You really can't. And so it's gonna turn into, the sport divided over these records, and people are gonna say, well, that record was set in this person's gym. This record was an actual competition record. It's just something that I don't think the sport of strongman needs right now. It's not good for the sport. And, this is not only applying to Hofstra, it'd be the same for Luke Stoltman, with the log record. I know Zadruna set so many different log records, and there was controversy over what log did he use. Was it metal? Was it wood? Was it weighed correctly? Was the down call good? That was all over the internet. And now, there's several guys that are, I would say, in my opinion, ready to at least take a shot at the log world record. And so allowing one man, in this instance, Luke, which is a strong, very strong guy, and there's nothing to say that he couldn't do a log world record in competition, but you're now allowing him to set a somewhat uncontested world record in his gym with nobody else there is not right. And again, we open Pandora's box of, well, what log did you use, and was it weighed correctly, and all this other stuff. And it's just not good, and all of the kind of controversy that's been put on the internet with Eddie Hall and Hofstra and all this different stuff. I mean, we got to keep it together here with the sport of strongman. And, I understand entertainment, and I understand, doing things for the fans. And if you want to live stream some training or a big attempt, that's great. But they can't be world records if we're setting them in gyms. An example that I can think of here is the Olympics. We've had athletes that have been training for 4 years for the Olympics. Now the Olympics aren't happening, right? That doesn't mean that you get to go to your training facility and have a, Olympic judge or whatever get on a stopwatch or get on measuring a distance or whatever event it is, and say, all right, well, now I have an Olympic record or a world record or whatever. That's just not how this works. There's athletes across the world in every sport right now that have trained and are ready to do different things. I mean, the NBA, I was looking forward to watching the NBA finals, but it's not like those guys can go do anything about this right now or claim that they, I don't know, set up in a home gym or something and put it on broadcast and say, hey, I won the NBA finals. I mean, that's maybe a silly example because it's a team sport versus individual, but the point is that everything is on hold right now, and we've got to keep it together. I know there's no governing body, and World's Ultimate Strongman, they've done some really good things, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about them, but they are not the governing body of the sport of strongman, right? That's not how this works, and if they aren't going to be in attendance and it's not a contest, we've got to just put this stuff on hold. And so, in my opinion, and this is not disrespectful at all to any of these athletes, but if Eddie Hall in 2016 would have said this all would have happened right before he was able to make his 500 kilo attempt, if he would have said, hey guys, I'm going to stream it from my gym and I'm going to call it a world record, I would have, along with a lot of people, if not everybody, would have said, nope, that doesn't count. You've got to do it in competition. right? And it's no different if Zydrunas would have said, I'm going to go set a log world record in my gym. I would have said, nope, that doesn't count. You know, you got to let other people try. You got to do it in a competition. And that goes for everybody else. And even for me, I don't care how good the scale is and what you're doing and how good your judge is. Doesn't matter, because you have to do it in competition. And if we go outside of that, what happens to our sport? You know, I mean, this is something that is very serious, guys. It's not just a video about, you know, whether or not this 501 kilo attempt should count or this record attempt should count. Myself, like I said, and a lot of guys that have paved the way with strongman, we need to hold it together, and the standard needs to keep going up, and we can't allow world records to start happening in people's gyms, because the door can't be closed. You can't close that door. If you're going to start allowing that to happen, you know, things are just not going to be good. And I understand worldwide right now that things aren't good, but this is not the answer. This is not the way forward. And again, you know, this is a very unbiased video that I feel like I needed to do, because I'm in a position, and you know, maybe after I'm done with strongman, I need to try to make or be part of that, you know, kind of governing body or federation or whatever, you know, to help the sport of strongman move forward and keep growing. You know, and I don't know if whoever came up with these ideas has put enough thought into what happens and how do we move forward if we allow these things to happen. I know that everybody's excited about seeing, especially this deadlift record that's got so much publicity. So many people want to see that happen, and I understand that. But as far as moving the sport forward, this is not the answer. It's just not the right answer. And I hope you guys can see this and understand where I'm coming from. And I hope that, you know, there's other athletes that can speak up, because this is something, you know, that we need to be careful with. We need to be very careful with where we're going right now with the sport of strongman and these world records, because I don't want it to be something where the water starts to get even muddier than what it was before this, because that's kind of how it's always been in strongman, and I think that things have been moving forward in the right direction, but I don't think that this is the answer. And I'm sorry, you know, for all of these athletes, especially Hafthor, that, you know, he wants to attempt this record and kind of get it out of the way and move on, and I understand that, but nobody else wanted this, you know, whatever's going on to happen. I was training really hard for World's Strongest Man. I don't get to do World's Strongest Man in May now, you know, and I can't do anything about that, you know, so everything's just kind of got to get put on hold. And again, from an entertainment perspective, if you want to do these lifts in your gyms, that's perfect, right? The fans can tune in, they could do the live stream, all of that. And, you know, you can even call it an unofficial world record or whatever, as an entertainment type of thing. But as far as calling it a world record, in my opinion, after competing in this sport since 2005 in my first amateur contest, in my opinion, you cannot call a world record lift if you do it in your home gym. Thanks, guys, for tuning into the video. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and you know, I hope all of you are doing great, and I guess for now, go out and be great, and we'll check you guys later.